Today I'm going to be cutting and fitting the guide blocks for the bolt of the lock. As well, I'm going to be installing the pivot pin that the key is going to rotate on. The bolt is going to be roughed out and just left oversized for now, and to cut that out I use the pattern that I used in the mock-up for the lock. Once these pieces get riveted to the back plate, I'm going to be able to start figuring out the key for this lock. I'm just cutting these out the same way that I do everything else. I'll drill holes to get rid of most of the material, and then I'll go in with some small cold chisels and carve away the rest of the material. And then at the very end, if I need to, I'm going to go in and smooth off the surface with a set of needle files. But generally, the chisel work takes care of 99% of it, and I really have very little left to do with files. The rear bolt guide is left open at the top, and that's going to allow me to remove the bolt from the lock and make any adjustments that I need to make while I'm fitting the key. And I'm using the same cut and chisel technique to remove most of the material for the tenons that are going to be riveting these guides to the back plate. To figure out the correct location for these guide blocks, you need to position the bolt around the path that the key is going to take through the lock. So here I've taken a Sharpie and I've highlighted the scribe line that defines the outside edge of the key as it's traveling through the lock. So when the bolt is in the locked position, I need to have the bolt positioned far enough to the left so the key can just enter into the bolt. And the reverse is true when the bolt is in the unlocked position. I need it to be far enough to the right so the key can just enter the notched portion of the bolt. So as you can see, the guide blocks perform two functions. They allow the bolt to slide left and right inside the lock, and they are also the stops that prevent the bolt from sliding too far out of position. Now this clip is a little bit out of sequence, and I do apologize for that, but it was just so much easier to explain to you how to position these guide blocks once they were riveted in place. And that was going to allow me to get my hands out of the way so you could actually see what was going on. So at this point in the process, I did figure out the location for the guide blocks, and I cut the mortises in the back plate that were going to accept the guide blocks, but you'll see in a moment they were actually the last things that I riveted in place. So here I'm back to working on the pivot pin for the key. And of course, if you have a lathe, that's by far the best way to make this piece. But here I'm just demonstrating how you can place a bar in a drill press and file out this shape in fairly short order and get a pretty good job out of it. I've started out with a 1/4" bar, and I'm turning the pivot pin for the key down to 1/8 of an inch. And once that's done, I'm going to cut it from the bar, and I'm going to start filing the rivet that's going to rivet the pin to the back plate. And that's only going to be turned down to 3/16 of an inch. So this is what I'm left with. I have a narrow pivot pin and then a large rivet with a shoulder that's going to act as the head of that rivet. So once I rivet this in place, this pin isn't going anywhere. This bolt with a hole in it I'm going to be using as the bottom die to support the rivet while I'm riveting it to the back plate. So as you can see, I've ground away the edges so it's just supporting the head of the rivet, and that's going to allow me to rivet this flush to the inside surface of the lock plate. And as you can see, I counterbored the inside plate slightly so the head has somewhere to go. Once it's riveted in place, I want it flush with the plate. Setting this rivet is going to take a little bit longer than normal because this bolt isn't giving me the backing that I would normally get from an anvil. And I'm also creating a fairly large rivet head to be sure that the pin is well anchored. I don't want the pin to start wobbling around after it's been used for a few years. And as I mentioned earlier, the final thing that I'm doing today is to rivet the guide blocks in place. And here you can see how the bolt can be easily taken in and out of the lock so I can do the final fitting and get the key working just right. Of course, the bolt is way too long, but it'll be trimmed to length as the final step when I'm done all of the fitting with the key. Hi, I'm Dennis, and thanks for watching. If you're interested in supporting this channel and you can spare $2.50 every month, click on the Patreon logo at the bottom of the screen. I'd really like to be able to expand the content of this channel and turn it into the best resource for anyone wanting to learn traditional crafts, but I need your help to get there. Thank you.